Perfect. I like how they've added that new thing in. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sharon Whiteman. And for those of you who are here a few minutes ago, you'd see I partner with this call every week with Diana Hunter and Gary Knapp. And we do that out of pure love for our community, for our mission with Manatech, on whatever level that you're partnered with us. And we're so blessed that Dr. Steve Nugent partners with us as often as he can in his busy schedule. So some of you, I'm just scanning, I know some of you haven't been here before. So I'll just give you a little bit about his background. Dr. Steve Nugent is Manatech's Chief Science Officer and Chairman of the Global Scientific Advisory Board. He has more than 40 years of experience in the area of integrative medicine. He has tested more than 6,000 dietary supplement products and formulated more than 100. He is internationally recognized as an expert in his field, and he's been teaching doctors for more than 30 years. He is Manatech's most requested speaker worldwide. He has earned multiple degrees, graduating with top honors at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. His areas of studies include integrative medicine, health and wellness psychology, leadership psychology, organizational psychology, neuropsychology, biological anthropology, nutrition science, and business administration. Dr. Nugent has served as president of the International Association of Complementary Medicine and is president emeritus of the American Naturopathic Medical Association. He is a professional member of the American College, and he was also awarded the Servant's Heart Award by Manatech Associates in 2007. Dr. Nugent is one of Australasia's favorites. You know, he carries the heart for the health, well-being, and education of everyone he meets. Dr. Nugent is passionate about giving the power of wellness back into the hands of everyday people. There's so much more that we can be doing to influence our health positively than we are led to believe. So today we're focusing on OsoLean. It's sort of an unsung hero that we have here at Manatech that's so important. Whether you're wanting to, reduce fat or not, you're going to learn about why it should be in everybody's diet. Dr. Nugent, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sharon. And, I just would like to, once again, not only thank you for your efforts, but for Diana and Gary for what you do every week. I know that it takes a lot of extra work out of your week to do this, to support all of our friends in Australasia. You guys are great, and I love you guys for doing it, and it's a privilege for me to do this call for you as often as I can.
Thanks so very much, Steve. It's mutual. It's mutual. So I'm going to go off camera, get my notebook, and enjoy. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Am I sharing? Oh, yes. I see I've got the sharing thing going on. All I have to do is figure out what the heck the right slides are.
It's all good.
Don't know. Sorry, folks. Hang on. Here we go. So many, I've got too many things open. Okay, so this morning, and by the way, good morning to all of you in Australasia. And this morning we're going to be talking about OsoLean. I hope that your container looks pretty similar to the one on my slides, because I don't have a picture of the Australian container, but I'm sure it's pretty similar. So we're going to talk about OsoLean this morning and why OsoLean is so important for all of you, not just for weight loss, but there are other benefits to OsoLean as well that we'll talk about this morning. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about diet. Diet is one of these things where there's a new diet every month or so. Somebody comes up with something new and catchy and, something with a really cool name. In fact, in recent times, they've been referring to low calorie as the Seco diet. And that's, especially the young kids started saying that, I'm on Seco. And they thought it was something new. Well, it's not new. A scientist at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor in the United States in 1930 was the first one to write a paper about, well, if we restrict our calories, we'll be losing body fat as a result. Now, interestingly, about a year later, as the whole medical community worldwide had just embarked on studies on this, and what they began to find is that it didn't work long-term for most people. And they didn't know why. Well, that has to do with certain metabolic effects that are still being studied today. In other words, if you restrict your calories for a very long period of time, you can, in some cases, kick in a gene. All of us have a gene which has been, it's been given a cool little name called the thrifty gene. And it's called the thrifty gene because it makes your body save body fat. You know, a lot of people will say to me, oh, I need more energy, especially people who want to lose fat. And they'll say, I'm so tired, I need more energy. And then I have to inform them that they've got lots of energy. In fact, the fatter you are, the more energy you have hanging on your body, because the purpose of fat is to provide you with energy. And this is a very ancient mechanism, ancient survival mechanism for human beings. And this goes under the heading of physical anthropology or biological anthropology. And what we know is that hunter-gatherers, and originally all of our ancestors were hunter-gatherers before they became farmers and so on. And our hunter-gatherer ancestors were really no different than the few hunter-gatherer tribes left today. And that is, they couldn't always find food. So in between looking for food, stored body fat was converted into energy so they could keep walking or running or moving and keep looking for food. That's the idea. Well, of course, today, food's way too easy to get. I mean, you drive up to a drive-through restaurant, you can walk to your refrigerator, you know, instead of going hunting and gathering, you just go to the grocery store and get what you want. Food's way too easy to get. So we don't have to burn off a lot of calories to get our food today. But we still have those same mechanisms built in us. And one of those mechanisms is the thrifty gene. So if you starve your body too much and too long, the thrifty gene will downregulate your metabolism and cause your whole metabolism to slow down. That makes it more difficult for you then to maintain your weight long term, and it makes it more difficult for you to lose weight on a future diet. This is why the overwhelming majority of people will report to you that, well, you know, I've been on all kinds of diets, but every time I diet, it gets more difficult each time. Well, it gets more difficult because of the thrifty gene. It's a protection mechanism in your body. By the way, I wrote about that in my diet book back in 2004. Some of you may remember that. Well, we're going to come back to the idea of the thrifty gene in a few minutes and why it's important to use OsoLean, okay? But right now, let's continue with the idea of dieting. So low-fat dieting started in 1948. Again, hardly new. And by 2015, what we had learned was that low-fat dieting was actually not a good idea. In fact, by 2009, there were already, I think, about 12 or 15 studies which had studied human beings and found out that low-fat wasn't everything we thought it was. Now, a low-fat diet, just so you know, is simply a different way of counting calories because fat grams are higher in calories than protein grams or carbohydrate grams. That's the idea. Well, then in 1972, we have this guy named Dr. Atkins, a man I knew, by the way, and had a number of conversations with him. I interviewed him on my Ask the Doctor program on the radio some years ago. He's passed on. But he comes up with a low-carb diet, the Atkins diet, back in 1972, and oh, this was marvelous. And every 10 years, it has a rebirth. And so people think it's brand new. And the next generation thinks it's new. It's not new. And the problem with the low carb diet is that it restricts carbohydrates without planning at all for proper nutrition. Now, if you've never done a low carb diet before and you do one and you do it strictly and you do it correctly, you will lose body fat. There's no question about it. You will, unless, of course, you've already triggered your thrifty gene. Then you might do it and have no success at all. 1979, a French-Canadian scientist kind of stumbled on the idea of what we now call low glycemic diet because he was working with patients who had blood sugar problems, and he was trying to figure out what kind of diet is best for these people with blood sugar problems. And so he stumbled on this, And he found that, yes, it managed their blood sugar more effectively, but they also lost body fat more effectively than doing low cal or doing low fat. In fact, low fat diets very often not only raise blood sugar, but very often actually cause you to store more body fat. And of course, the most popular diet on the planet at this moment, I mean, who knows what the most popular diet is going to be next week? But at this moment, it's the keto diet. Well, a keto diet basically is the low carb diet, except you add good fat to it. Now, why would you want to add good fat? Well, your body actually needs a certain amount of fat, and good fat actually helps you burn fat. Good fat helps you to convert stored body fat into energy. So this is getting a lot of press. In fact, I'm a professional member of the American College of Nutrition. And it was very interesting to me that they've now created a course specifically for dietitians to become certified in the keto diet, which I find fascinating that they want to go that far with it. Well, let's talk a little bit about science. You know, I love science. All of you know that. And we have 2 double-blind placebo-controlled studies on the OsoLean product. This is important to me because I'm absolutely open to anybody who has a testimonial that's great. I love to hear them. But as a scientist, I want to see evidence which is fully objective so that we don't have anything else interfering with the results. And that when we get a conclusion, we know the conclusion is correct because it's been arrived at objectively. So in a double-blind study, what you have is not just the test subject, and here we're talking about human double-blind versus doing animal studies. But what you have in the human double-blind study is the human test subject doesn't know what they're swallowing. And even the doctors conducting the test, they don't know what they're administering. Some people get a placebo. Some people get the actual stuff that you want them to have. So we've done this now in 2 studies. And what we know is that OsoLean for sure increases the rate at which you lose body fat versus simply doing a low-cal diet or a low-fat diet. We know from the studies, and keep in mind that everybody's focused on BMI, body mass index. The World Health Organization came out with that in the early 1970s. They've stayed with it because it's easy, because you don't need any devices for it. I proved, by the way, in a scientific study of almost 4,000 people, which I financed myself, by the way, because studies are expensive, and you can't always get, company funds to do these things. But in that study, I showed conclusively that BMI is essentially worthless. However, most people haven't read that study, and they're going to keep saying BMI anyway. So I'll give you some examples as we move forward. What's the technology in OsoLean? Well, the technology is peptide technology. The problem that we've got with nutritional labels is we have to follow whatever the directive is of whatever country we're selling the product in. And lots of countries have different ways of looking at the same thing. As a scientist, for me, science is science, and that should be the end of it. So when you arrive at a fact objectively, that's the fact, and there's nothing else to discuss. But different governments have different policies, and so labels appear differently from country to country. In most countries, we have to refer to OsoLean as a whey protein powder. Well, it is derived from whey, but it's much more than a whey protein powder. In fact, what it really is a peptide technology. Now, some of you might be saying, what the heck does that mean? All right. The best way, I think the simplest way for me to describe this is to have you imagine in your mind a pearl necklace. Everyone's seen a pearl necklace before. So imagine that the pearl necklace, the total of the necklace is the protein. Now imagine that each pearl on the necklace is a peptide of the protein. Now, every peptide has different functions. And what we've been able to do through good science is to identify certain peptides for certain functions, and then to isolate them from the protein so we can use that for specific purposes. Now, folks, this is very cool science. So I want you to imagine that we are sculpting, if you will. So we take that pearl necklace and we're going to sculpt the necklace to remove just the peptides we want. And we're going to do this using something called proteolytic enzymes. That's just a fancy word that means enzymes that digest protein, okay? Now, most companies, when they're working with peptides, will use chemicals. And of course, at Manitech, we don't want to use chemicals. And it's good science to use proteolytic enzyme. So we're using proteolytic enzymes to then isolate the peptides. Now, this is important. If this was just whey protein powder, well, big deal. It can help to support muscle mass, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. And it helps you with general protein intake, all good things. But what we really wanted to do with this product is to have specific functions from specific isolated peptide fractions. And that's what we've done in OsoLean. That's why this product is far more than just a whey protein powder, far more. In fact, it has 3 separate active functions. Now, I like this because 3 is easy to remember. In fact, psychological studies tell us that the easiest number of things to remember is 3 or less. 4 or more gets more difficult. So I'm glad that there's 3 here to talk about. So what's number 1? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is to help you with protein synthesis. Now, this is important not only to form new muscle mass, and I'll talk to you in a few moments why that's important to your fat loss program, more than you know, and also important to your long-term success. But it's also important for all the cells of your body, because the cells of your body are made of proteins. And you need to have a certain amount of protein every day to be healthy. In fact, and I'm going to probably repeat this number before we're done, or I should say these numbers. For women, women need, this is not a question, folks, women need a minimum of 46 grams of protein every day to maintain muscle mass. Men need a minimum of 56 milligrams of protein every day to maintain muscle mass. I'm going to say this in a different way because there are some folks now who would say, what's that number? I know, because when I do these lectures live, I always see people reacting in the audiences. What was that number again? Okay, so women need a minimum of 46 grams of protein per day. Men, a minimum of 56 grams of protein per day. Now, when I say minimum, this is based on averages. Now, if you are a larger person, for instance, in some countries in the world, let's go to the Netherlands as an example. The tallest people in Europe are in Netherlands. In fact, some of the tallest people on the whole planet are in the Netherlands. So the average female in the Netherlands is larger than the average female, or than the average female in the rest of the world. So women in the Netherlands are probably going to need more protein because they're bigger, okay? And they have more muscle mass to support. So I want you to understand, when I say minimum 46 for women, minimum 56 for men, we are talking about global averages, okay? And then you'll make allowances for that yourself as you're doing your own calculations. Now, most people aren't getting that much protein every day from their healthy diet. So it's important that you do that. It's very, very important. In the mix of this product, OsoLean, we have leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Those are the branch chain amino acids. Those amino acids are essential for protein synthesis. So to make cells out of protein and to make more muscle mass, you need protein, and that requires leucine, isoleucine, and valine, those 3 amino acids. It's also interesting that we have, and we have inhibiting peptides in here as well. Peptides that actually inhibit something called angiotensin converting enzyme. That'll get people confused. So just think about inhibiting peptides that help you to metabolize adipose tissue or fat cells, all right? So inhibiting peptides that help you to metabolize fat cells. And we have glycomacropeptides, which stimulate the release of something called cholecystokinin. All right, now some of you are going, whoa, wait, stop, explain this. Okay, fine. We'll spend a moment on this. Usually on your blood test, what you'll see is simply the letters CCK. And most practitioners just say CCK. I mean, nobody says cholecystokinin, all right? What is cholecystokinin? Why do you need it? What do the glycomacropeptides do? All right, now you recognize glyco, macro, so glyco, we're talking about saccharides, macro meaning big, okay, and peptides. So these glycomacropeptides, when they go from your mouth to a little pocket underneath your stomach, which is called the duodenum, when they hit that pocket, the duodenum sends a chemical signal to the brain. And the signal says, I'm not very hungry anymore. Now that's facilitated through cholecystokinin or CCK. Here's the important thing. You see on the label, it says, use this product 20 minutes before meals. Now, I can't tell you, I've lost track of how many people since we initially introduced this product who've said to me, well, I tried to use OsoLean, but I forgot to take it 20 minutes before the meal, so I just didn't do it. All right, everybody pay attention. If you take it 20 minutes before your meal, you'll get the benefits of the glycomacropeptides to help you reduce your appetite. If you don't use it 20 minutes before the meal, you'll still get all of the other benefits. So no excuses, okay? If you forgot to do it 20 minutes before the meal, do it anyway. But remember, if you want it to help with your appetite control, you need to do it 20 minutes before the meal, okay? And you'll see on the slide, so satiation, that means reduce your appetite. And you'll see also on the slide the word lipolysis, and all that means is converted stored body fat into energy. That's all it means. Right? This is a bar chart, which comes from the first study that was done on our, quote, peptide powder. Now, the reason it has to be labeled this way is because the study was done on OsoLean before we bought the product. In fact, this was the study that got us interested in the product. So since it was not done on OsoLean as a Manitech product, it has to be labeled as the peptide powder, okay? All right, well, I think all of you get it right now. OsoLean's a peptide powder, right? It's not just a whey protein. So what are you looking at on the chart here? Well, researchers know, and it's not new, we've known this for many, many decades. Researchers know that when you go on a diet, you're going to lose at least as much muscle as you do fat. Now, for most people, they think this is a good thing because they stand on the scale. And when they stand on the scale, their scale weight has gone down. And the more it goes down, the more successful they think they are. Here's the problem. Muscle is the fat burner. The more muscle you have, the more fat you burn. The less muscle you have, the less fat you burn. It's pretty simple. This is why what we want you to do is to lose fat and at least maintain muscle, but ideally raise your muscle mass. And that's why you've heard me talking in the past about body composition. So I would rather say improve your body composition than to say lose weight. Because if you lose weight, you're going to lose some muscle, right? If you improve your body composition, what are you doing? You are lowering body fat and you're increasing muscle mass. That's ideal. That's what you want. So what you see on this chart is the control group. The control group is getting a placebo, but they don't know it. And in the control group and in the peptide group, they're both doing exactly the same diet, which is a low-calorie diet. And they're both doing exactly the same amount of physical activity, which laughingly is only 30 minutes 1 day a week. All right, that's not a lot of physical activity, but that's what they're doing. All right. So the control group, what you see is they're losing exactly the same amount of muscle and fat. So yes, if you looked at it in terms of weight loss, it would look good. But if you look at it in terms of body composition, not so good, because you've lost the same amount of muscle mass as you've lost in fat mass. Now, if you go on any kind of a diet, folks, and I know that many of you watching right now have been on many diets in your life. You go on a diet, you lose muscle mass, then you start to gain the weight back a little bit faster than you expected. You think, what is up with that? Well, it could be the thrifty gene, and it could be that you lost a significant enough amount of muscle mass where you now can't burn enough fat. You can't convert enough fat into energy. Muscles require this conversion. In fact, the best way to fuel your muscle is by oxidizing your fat into energy. That's the idea, okay? Versus taking a stimulant, which is what most people do for energy. So in the peptide group, you see something different, don't you? What you see is that about 25% of what was lost was muscle mass, and almost 75% more loss of weight is fat mass. So this showed us in the very first study that you lose far more fat than muscle when you use this product on your weight loss program, whatever your weight loss program is based on. These are medical teaching models that I like to use when I'm live with people. And in these medical teaching models, what you want to see is that on one side of the screen, you see this big yellow blob. That is 1 kilo of fat. And on the other side of the screen, on the other side of the scale, the teeter-totter, I'm not sure if you use that term in Australasia, but in the US we say teeter-totter, and I think you do in Canada as well. But on the right side, or on the other side, what you see is a very small red mass. That small red mass is muscle mass, 1 kilo. Now I want you to think about this. They're both 1 kilo, but what's the difference besides the color? The difference is one of them takes a lot of space and the other one doesn't. So then, if you're losing fat mass, this means your centimeters are reducing. Your clothes are fitting better. Now, if you lose too much muscle mass, well, your clothes are going to change as well, but not the way you want them to, right? I mean, you're going to be in smaller clothing, but you're also going to be less fit than you were and weaker than you were. And this is because muscle mass is approximately 20% more dense per centimeter, heavier than fat mass. So you want to lose fat and at least retain muscle, if not increase muscle. Increase muscle would be ideal because the more muscle you have, the easier it is to burn stored body fat. The reason you have stored body fat is to fuel your muscles. So that's why you want to have more muscle. Okay, I've already done that. I'm sorry, my slides are stuck. There we go. So I did a couple of studies, and you folks can read, they're boring as heck. It's just a lot of numbers and statistics. But the point here of the study was testing nearly 4,000 people to find out, does BMI, body mass index, give you an accurate look at how healthy someone is? And the answer is no, it doesn't. Now, your doctor's still going to do it because it's unlikely that your doctor has read my study. I wouldn't mind if more people read the study, of course. So you'll find in one paper that I did, I wrote it up as BCI, or body composition improvement. And in the final paper that I did on this, it was body composition change index, or BCCI. And the whole idea here is more muscle mass, less fat mass, strong bone mass, because bone also has weight, obviously, okay? Now, this is a graphic illustration of two men from my study. And I selected these two because they were both the same BMI. They are both the same height, 180.3 centimeters. They are both the same weight, 99.7 kilograms. They're both the same BMI that says they are both obese, 30.7. Obviously, one man in the study is obese and the other man clearly is not. Well, what's the difference? BMI is nothing more than the ratio of how tall you are to how much you weigh on the scale. That's all it is. So the assumption is if you weigh less, then you have less body fat, but that is not always true. In fact, more and more we're finding out that it's not true. So what's the big difference here for these two men? Well, it's something called BMR, and that's basal metabolic rate. And what does BMR mean? That's the rate at which you convert stored body fat into energy, the rate at which you take that fat that you want to get rid of and you fuel your muscles. So the more muscle you have, the easier it is to lose body fat and the easier it is to keep your body fat off long term. Well, the big difference between these two men is that the bodybuilder over on one side of the screen, he has to consume 540 more calories than the couch potato in order to simply maintain his weight, not lose or gain, but just to maintain. And if the couch potato eats more than that 540 calories, then he will gain more body fat, not muscle mass. He'll gain more body fat. All right. So I wanted you to see that this is not, not about scale weight. It's not about losing weight. Now, unfortunately, most of the governments in the world force us to use the words weight loss. Most governments will not allow us to say fat loss because they don't have anything written into the regulations and they don't want to change the regulations. And none of them yet are clued into BCCI. None of them are clued into body composition changes. You want to improve your body composition, lose fat, gain muscle, strong bones. That's what you want to do. So then what you want to do to measure your change, measure your improvement, measure your results is not stand on the scale. Now, saying that, and I've been saying this for more than 40 years, first when I was in practice and now my 25 plus years with Manatech. I'm going to say it, but people are not going to do it. And I'm going to say, don't stand on your scale. They're going to stand on their scale anyway. There's nothing I can say. They're still going to do it. The temptation is overwhelming. So let me say this to you. Don't stand on your scale more than once a week. Don't do it every day. That's foolish because your weight changes by the hour. Your weight changes as your fluid intake changes. You will always weigh less first thing in the morning than you do before you go to bed. That kind of thing, okay? It's not an accurate way to measure your progress. But if you get yourself a Taylor's tape and you measure your changes in centimeters, and I suggest that you do this by measuring the following points. So you start by measuring your neck and measure your shoulders as though you're measuring yourself for a suit. Measure your upper arm, measure your lower arm, measure your wrists. measure your waist, measure your chest. Also measure your thighs and measure your calves and measure your ankles. Now, why would I want you to measure all those places? Well, all of us are different biochemically, and believe it or not, even identical twins are not genetically identical. Now, I'm not talking about fraternal twins. I'm talking about identical twins. Even identical twins are not genetically identical. This has been recently proven in genetic studies. This means that you are not going to be identical to your neighbor, to your friend that's on the program with you. You're not. Some people are going to be losing fat more in certain places than other places. Some people are going to lose fat, let's say from, I don't know, their upper arms before they lose them from their hips or their waist. So if you measure each week, measure every 7 days, don't measure every day. That's foolish. It will discourage you. The changes will not be that significant on a daily basis. Do it once a week. And do it with a friend, by the way. Have a friend measure you. Make sure your friend always does the same points every day with the same amount of pressure to the tapes and no cheating going on here, right? All right. And you measure all these points because I want you to see positive results every week to encourage you to stay with it. It's too easy to find an excuse to quit, which is what happens with the whole scale weight thing, all right? And of course, your clothing sizes are going to change in a positive way as well if you're doing this right. Now, you'll find that every government says that we have to have a healthy lifestyle, and I agree. And that starts with diet. Interestingly, I just had a fairly long meeting with a scientist from Israel, and he said to me very bluntly, he said, the only way to lose weight is to shut your mouth. Which I actually enjoyed his bluntness very much. Well, you have to control your intake. Folks, if you think there's magic out there, there's not. If somebody comes to you and says, I have this new magic miracle product, and if you take this product, this magic product, you can eat whatever you please, and you're going to look fabulous. Well, folks, that's a fantasy. It's just not the case. All right. So you need to choose your food correctly. The lion's share of scientific study on glycemic index dieting has been done by Australian scientists at the University of Sydney, New South Wales. Now, for a lot of people to say, oh, glycemic, that sounds complicated. It's too scientific. I can't do it. And it doesn't sound cool. Well, it doesn't sound cool. And it does sound scientific, but it's pretty darn easy. Basically what it is, it's a low carb diet that recommends healthy vegetables and small amounts of healthy fruit. Not all fruit is the right thing for you to do, by the way. Too much sugar is always your enemy. Well, let's talk a little bit how the conversion process then works. It's all about blood sugar. Everything about fat loss and maintaining that fat loss is all about blood sugar. If you eat a food that is high glycemic, that means that that food has caused your insulin to spike because it's caused your blood sugar to rise rapidly. Now, this would be, and I apologize if I use the wrong terms that are unfamiliar, but I'm just going to say, just to avoid that, I'll say pastries, okay? So if you're going to eat rolls and biscuits and that sort of thing, whatever the correct terms are in Australasia, you know what I'm talking about, okay? So pastries. If you eat a pastry, oh, they're delicious. You love them. They're fabulous. And remember that saying, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips, right? Well, you don't want to do that to yourself. But if you do, what's going to happen is those refined carbohydrates that make up bread, that make up pastries, that make up pasta, those refined carbohydrates convert rapidly to blood sugar. A rapid blood sugar conversion results in an insulin spike. When you spike your insulin, you shut off the mechanism that will convert stored body fat into energy. And then the stuff that you're eating just turns to more stored body fat. This is why the low glycemic diet came into being. This is why it works. But again, if it seems too complicated for you, or if it sounds too scary, it's simply, it's basically a low carb diet that allows for and recommends, as I recommend, vegetables and also some fruit, small amounts of fruit. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And of course, you need to physically exercise. If you're taking protein into your body, but you're not pushing your muscles in some way, the protein will not convert to muscle mass. It will not convert. It's not magic. You can't just swallow the protein and say, oh man, look at those muscles, right? That doesn't work like that. There has to be resistance on the muscles or they will not increase. Now, what can the resistance be? Whatever you like. Folks, if you're going to be successful long-term, pick a program that you know you will continue long-term. If you decide you're going to hit the gym like a maniac for a week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, and then you realize you can't keep up the maniac pace the rest of your entire life, guess what's going to happen? You're going to start to gain back body fat really fast. So pick something you know will work. Does that mean walking every night after dinner? Does it mean riding your bicycle? Does it mean doing aerobic dancing? Whatever it means for you, physical activity that puts stress on the muscle. The more stress you put on a muscle, the more it will desire protein, the more protein it needs, and the more protein it will take in, and the greater the muscle will build. The greater you build your muscle, the easier it is to burn fat. That is so easy. The principle is just so easy. It's also important for you to keep a daily diet record. I found this very early in my practice because when I first got into practice, I saw a lot of people that wanted to lose weight. And what I found was they didn't realize what they were doing to themselves when they were failing. Because a lot of times, food's so easy to get, they were just shoving food in their mouths all the time, didn't even realize what they were doing. So start to keep a daily diet record. Every day, whatever you eat and whatever you drink, including water, everything, write it down. Do this for at least a week. That's going to give you a different picture of what you normally do every day. And it's going to help you in the future to make the right changes. Remember, measure yourself, measure your centimeters once a week, not once a day. And if you have to stand on the darn scale, don't do it more than once a week, okay? Because you'll be disappointed. I have to hit a couple of the FAQs that always come up with OsoLean. All right, the first thing is there are some people who are either philosophically opposed to dairy or they believe that they are allergic to dairy. So let's talk about this. OsoLean powder comes from whey. Whey comes from milk, okay? And so if you have a problem with milk philosophically, this is not the product for you. If it's not a philosophical problem, but you think that you have an allergy, well, let's talk about that. The majority of people who think they're allergic to milk are not. In fact, milk allergy is fairly rare. However, lactose intolerance is fairly common. So for most people, if they have a lactose intolerant symptom, they think that means they have an allergy. It's not the same. It's not the same thing at all. The World Health Organization says that you need to take in at least 25 milligrams of lactose, which is the sugar in milk. So that's why milk has a bit of a sweetness to it, right? Because of the lactose in it. You have to take in 25 milligrams to have lactose intolerance symptoms. Those symptoms can be all kinds of things: gas, bloating, diarrhea, cramping, can be lots of things like that. Can be quite unpleasant for some people and make them think they have an allergy to milk. There are 4 kinds of lactose intolerance, but the most common is called primary lactose intolerance. And that simply means that your body is no longer producing an enzyme called lactase. So in chemistry, it ends in OSE, it's a sugar. It ends in ASE, it's an enzyme. Pretty simple, okay? So lactase is required to break down lactose. If your body's not making lactase, then you will have digestive symptoms. By the way, folks, this is the case with any food you eat, anything. If you eat a food and it gives you gas, bloating, cramping, diarrhea, discomfort, it's because you didn't have the enzyme to break it down, okay? But let's go back to lactose for a minute. So lactase is something that human beings make routinely up to about the age of 24 months, and that would be across all races. In Black Africans, they make it up for about 24 months, and for Europeans, they will make it up to 5 years of life. We're not 100% sure of why that difference is, but just so you know, if you happen to be one of those two groups. For East Asians, they tend to be in the 24-month group as well. So it is quite common to have lactose intolerance among East Asians, okay? So it's good to know that as well. In one serving of OsoLean, which is 12.2 milligrams of protein, you have approximately 0.336 milligrams of lactose. You need 25 milligrams to have lactose reaction. And there's only 0.336 of 1 milligram of lactose in OsoLean. So are you likely to have a reaction to it? Probably not. Is it possible that you could? Sure, anything's possible. But it's unlikely that you will, just so you know that. What about the allergy thing? If you have an allergy to milk, it has nothing to do with lactose. It's about a protein called casein. Now, our OsoLean product is not just a whey protein, as I've mentioned. It is meticulously filtered, not once, not twice, but 3 different times through different types of filtration with the idea of targeting casein. So we want to try and get the casein out. And what I have to say to all of you, because this is important, a true allergic reaction can be very, very serious. If you know you're allergic to casein, you should never consume a dairy product. End of story. Even though we've never been able to find any casein in our final product, it doesn't mean that it couldn't occur one day. It may occur, who knows? Machines can go out of calibration, anything can happen, okay? So if you know you're allergic to casein, that's the protein in milk that people are allergic to. If you know that, then you avoid all dairy products, end of story. But I want you to know that we have gone out of our way and expense-wise to give you the purest peptide product that you can get on the market. And we are very, very proud of this product and just how pure, as well as how effective it is. Again, proven by 2 different studies. We know that when you use this product, you will burn off more body fat than muscle mass by almost 75%. So that's huge, and that's important. Well, let's go back to our proteins again. So I've already done this casein bit, but let's go back to the proteins again. And oh yes, I should explain this to you. If you feel that you've had any kind of a safety issue, or you suspect some kind of safety issue, then the email to is safetymonitoring@manatech.com. The email to is not me, please. I get so many emails now. I'm averaging close to 180 emails a day. Folks, you can't imagine, and I can't keep up. And some of my dearest friends in the world find themselves in my inbox for weeks before I get to them, simply because I can't even filter through them every day. So help me out with this, folks. If you have a safety issue, go to safetymonitoring@manatech.com, or if you believe there's a safety issue, okay? Let's go there first, and we'll do all the proper steps that way. And they will bring it to my attention, that's a guarantee. All right. There are 450 milligrams of calcium per serving in this, and that is great because this is a food form calcium that's very easy for the body to absorb. That's great, but there's a downside. And the downside is if you're taking in 450 milligrams of calcium, but you're not taking in half as much magnesium, then you may not process that calcium. Recently, by the way, I did a podcast, which you can find on drnugent.com, and that's all lower cases, no spaces, no dots, drnugent.com, drnugent.com. And you will find a podcast I did on calcium, and I invite you to listen to it and learn how too much calcium can be a problem. And so why I tell everybody, if you're taking extra calcium, make sure you're getting enough magnesium every day. Now, there just isn't much magnesium in cow's milk. There isn't much in whey protein. It's very, very small levels. So make sure that you're using your Catalyst multiple vitamin every day. And if you feel that your personal calcium intake is even higher than the average person, and you're using OsoLean, well, you might want to take an additional magnesium supplement as well. You're going to have to decide that based on your personal needs. But I want you to understand that the 450 milligrams of calcium is a great thing. It's a great benefit, and it's food form. So that's fabulous. But I want you to make sure, because your health is my first and most important concern, I want you to make sure that you have sufficient magnesium every day. And generally, that's about a 2-to-1 ratio. You'd be amazed at how much calcium there is in food and how little magnesium there is in the modern diet. So please listen to my podcast on drnugent.com, and you'll get that information on calcium. I think it may surprise you. Some of it may surprise you. But I want to go back to protein for just a moment while we still have a couple of minutes left in the hour. Again, women need a minimum of 46. Men need a minimum of 56 grams of protein daily. This is going to provide you with 12.2 grams per serving. That's fabulous. That's great. But you need to adjust your diet to make sure that you're getting the amount of protein you need, or you will not be able to increase your muscle mass. If you don't increase your muscle mass, then you may be struggling to not only lose body fat, but to keep that body fat off long term. Because once you've lost the body fat, you don't want it to come back. You want to keep it on. And some of you are also going to find that there are different metabolic types, of course. Some people are metabolically, and I know some of you may be jealous of them. I know I am. But there are some people who are metabolically naturally thin, and they're always, their body is always revved up, oxidizing that fat super fast. And that's amazing. And it's wonderful. But I want everyone to understand this. The majority of people who buy dietary supplements planet-wide are over the age of 40. The majority of Manatech associates are over the age of 55. You start losing muscle mass in tiny amounts at the age of 28. By the time you're 40, you're losing statistically significant amounts every year. By the time you're 50, you're starting down a pretty serious road. Folks, you will lose muscle mass as you age. If you do not take in enough protein every day, this will, not it might be a problem for you, it will be a problem for you. You've heard about elderly folks who lose their balance and fall frequently. That has to a very significant level, that is about their muscle strength and muscle mass. Do not allow your muscle mass to get too low. Make sure you're getting enough protein every day. And this is an excellent source of the peptides you need to help you convert that stored body fat into energy and to give you support for at least maintaining your muscle mass. And of course, I want you to do more than that. I want you to increase your muscle mass because that will help you long term. So OsoLean is a great product, but I want you to have your diet sort of in proper perspective. Now, in the United States for years, they used the food pyramid. They don't know. But every country has their own way. In some countries, they represent it as a chart or a plate or a table or whatever. Okay. But let's do the pyramid because I like this. It's kind of cool. So the American government says you should eat mostly grain products. You should eat mostly bread and pasta and muffins and all this. Now, they say this because it's good for the economy and it's easy to feed people that way. But their official excuse is that, oh, because it's low fat. But remember what I told you earlier, if you eat this stuff, it will almost certainly raise your blood sugar too fast, which causes an insulin spike, which causes you to shut off the mechanism that burns stored body fat, which is why low-fat diets are a bad idea. Okay. And then, of course, they go up to vegetables and fruit, dairy and meat, and then on the top of their pyramid, they have sweets. How about that? Well, here's my food pyramid. Here's the way you should eat. Most of what you eat every day should be vegetables. And I don't mean kind of most, I mean most. The overwhelming majority of what you put in your mouth every day should be vegetables. Small amounts of fruit. Think about fruit as nature's dessert, because that's what it is. Small amounts, okay? And certain fruits are not a good idea. You can find that by looking up the glycemic index. Dairy products are high in protein, very high in protein, and various trace minerals as well. Meat will provide you more nutrition by gram weight than any other food. There's no argument there. It will. Than any other naturally occurring food. I'm not talking about manipulated foods of various types, okay? Now, if you choose not to eat meat for philosophical reasons, that's up to you. But I just want you to know that that's going to provide you with certainly more protein, but more everything, more nutrients across the whole spectrum. You need nutritional oils, omega-3, omega-9, not omega-6. You're almost certainly getting too much omega-6 already. Omega-3, omega-9. You can get enough omega-9 with 1 tablespoon of olive oil per day. Every day, I have at least 1 tablespoon of olive oil. You should too. Eat small amounts of nuts and seeds, not a lot, just small amount. And if you have to eat a grain product for your fiber, if that's the only way you know how to get fiber, your fiber should come from vegetables, folks. But if that's the only way you know how to get fiber, then eat grain products that are difficult to digest. The more difficult to digest, the lower the glycemic index. It's that simple. And of course, make sure you take your dietary supplements that you need. And whatever your chosen physical activity is, walking, bicycling, swimming, playing tennis, whatever your physical activity is, start getting in the habit. Do a physical activity at least every other day. If it's super hardcore, like you're going to kill yourself in the gym, trust me, most of you will not continue that for any length of time, right? That should not be every day. You should alternate muscle groups every other day, but you'll make your own choices on that. Do physical activity. Your muscles will not utilize the protein unless you put pressure on the muscle. It won't do it, okay? So take in enough protein and make sure you're doing some kind of physical activity. Again, walking, swimming, whatever the activity is of your choice, okay? OsoLean. Yeah, the label says whey protein supplement, but you know, it's a peptide technology for targeted fat loss. So I hope that will answer some questions and get people on the road to being able to introduce this product to more people who need it. Sharon, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
What a good refresher. In fact, I had, there's some things in there that I've forgotten since the last time we've touched on this in depth. So thank you. Gonna tweak a couple things I'm doing. We do have some questions. I think you've answered them, but I'm just going to make sure, because sometimes reinforcing it is a good thing. So is it necessary to take your OsoLean 20 minutes before your TruPlenish?
No. In fact, you can mix them both together at the same time. That's fine. In fact, you really should take if your TruPlenish is going to be your meal, if that's the question, then no, not to worry about that. But only if you're going to have some kind of full meal.
Okay, and then there's a couple questions about whether there's enough magnesium in Catalyst to counteract the calcium in OsoLean, that balance that you mentioned.
Okay, so say the beginning of that again, please.
Is there enough magnesium in Catalyst?
Okay. It depends on what else they're doing in their diet. Okay, which is why I recommend they listen to my podcast to kind of pick up some tips on that. But for a lot of people, it will be enough. And for some people, it will not be enough. Like in my particular case, and I say it on my podcast, I take more than 1,100 milligrams of magnesium supplemental to my Catalyst every day, because my diet is very high in calcium. And the last thing I want is calcification of my arteries, kidney stones, calcification of my soft tissues. I'm just not interested in that.
Okay, perfect. And you mentioned about the low calorie diets turning off the metabolism. How long does it turn it off for? And I know you did touch on how to re-switch it back on, but can you just reinforce that, please?
Yeah, that's kind of difficult. It's going to be different for everyone, depending on their metabolic type, depending on their thyroid function, depends on a number of things. If they have normal blood sugar or abnormal blood sugar, just a number of factors. Generally speaking, if you are doing this to your body for more than, say, 6 weeks or so on a very restricted calorie intake, you are almost certainly going to trigger your thrifty gene. If you do crazy levels of exercise, and there are a lot of people who, they buy the gym membership and they go nuts for like 2 weeks, right? And then they quit. They say, oh man, I hurt, this is bad, I don't want to do this anymore. But there are people that just go crazy with exercise. And I have to try and counsel them and say, let's do a reality check for a minute. And let's say that person who's going crazy with exercise is, I don't know, let's say they're 45, right? Someday they're going to be 55. And what's going to happen with the degeneration of their cells, the natural degeneration, so I'm not talking about a disease, just a natural aging process, they will not be able to keep up the same level of activity at 55 that they did at 45. They won't be able to do it. Then the thrifty gene will kick in. It'll bite them. And they'll start putting on body fat, and then they'll be saying, what am I going to do? I'm exercising every day, and I'm eating right, and I'm putting on weight. And that's because they've kicked in the thrifty gene. Okay, so it can be going too nuts on exercise. So that's why I kept saying, you choose your exercise. Make sure it's realistic. Whatever it is, make sure it's a realistic choice. And of course, don't do excessive calorie restriction for a long period of time. How long does it take to put it back? That varies with everyone. I've seen cases where it's taken more than a year of hard work to shut that darn gene off before they can start doing normal fat conversion. And we have no way at this time, with the current genetic studies to know for sure how long it might take for everybody. There are some people who it appears are not able to shut the thing off. Like it just stays forever and ever, and they just can't get the weight off their body. So I can't give you 100% answer to that question, but it can take a long time, and just don't do it. Just don't go there, and then you won't have to worry about it happening.
Yes, and PKU, people who have experience of PKU, which I think is phenylketonuria, I believe.
Yes.
Is there any contraindications with OsoLean for them?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't had that question in like 1,000 years. I would want to double check on that, but as far as I know, as far as I can remember, there's no phenylalanine because that's a reactive phenylalanine. Okay. As far as I can recall, there's no phenylalanine in this product. But if someone has that concern, they need to write in an email. Let's verify it, because at this moment, I don't have a way to verify it. everything on my end is closed. It's after 7 p.m. in the evening on Friday. So I can't get to that data right now, but let's do that and check out to be sure.
Okay, perfect. I think that's the end of the questions that I saw in the chat and in the questions. So Dr. Nugent, very generous as always with your time and knowledge and expertise. We love you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I love you guys too. I miss you guys a lot.
I know, this is ridiculous. Let's see a different year for 2022.
I hope so. I hope we get back to normal.
Yes, I think it's on the horizon. Thanks, Dr. Nugent. Thanks to each and every person listening today or in the future. We appreciate you too. So have a great weekend. Bye.